Mine and Stephanie's topic was Reconstruction, which is chapter 16. So first we're going to go over some key terms. Some key terms in this chapter were black codes, carpetbaggers, scow wages, Compromise of 1877, Congressional Reconstruction, and Field Order Number 15. Other terms were lost cause, redeemers, sharecropping, slaughterhouse cases, union leagues, and the case of the United States versus Cruikshank. Development of the sharecropping system. So during the sharecropping system, most African Americans were still engaged in agricultural work. After the Civil War, they planned that the African American workers were working with supervision of white overseers. African Americans didn't approve of this because they felt like it was the same thing as the slavery system from the past. They wanted their own plow and mule to start a new life. Radical Republicans supported this idea and urged the government to grant it to them. However, they did not gain enough support. So continuing on with the sharecropping system, African Americans began to rent land and would customarily pay rent with a portion of their yearly crop, usually half. The compromise was to work without an overseer, and after paying back loans for seed money and school, sharecroppers were left with very little for themselves. Lincoln and his plan. Lincoln was eager to restore the Union quickly and had an initial goal of restoring Southern representation in Congress. He vetoed the Wade-Davis bill, which was established strictly standards for the Southern states to meet. In 1865, in his second inaugural address, Lincoln announced that he wanted to reunite the country. In 1865 through 1867 was the presidential Reconstruction. The responsibility for developing a Reconstruction policy initially fell on Andrew Jackson, who succeeded for the presidency upon Lincoln's assassination. Johnson's plan consisted of loyalty oath for the majority of the male population. States must repeal the law by which the state withdrew from the Union. He ratified the 13th Amendment, which had prevented Southern states from reestablishing slavery after the war, and the United States would repudiate the Confederate war debt. Johnson had assumed that black people, once freed, would immigrate to Africa. Johnson and congressional clash. Johnson vetoed two measures passed by Congress, an extension of the Freedmen's Bureau and a Civil Rights Act that was designed to overturn the black codes that the Southern states had implemented. The amendment further guaranteed all citizens equal protection of the laws and prohibited states from denying any citizen life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Although the amendment didn't exceed voting guarantees to blacks, it did allow Congress to reduce the representation of states that withheld the vote from black males. The impeachment of President Johnson. During impeachment of President Johnson, the president violated the Tenure of Office Act. After the impeachment trial, the Senate didn't find Johnson guilty and couldn't stop Congress's Reconstruction plans. And in this cartoon here, you can see that Johnson is saying that they can go ahead and impeach him, but what are they really doing to the South? Reconstruction and not Reconstruction. The uses of violence during this period included one of the major ones being the Ku Klux Klan, which was founded in Tennessee by 6 Confederate veterans in 1866. The Ku Klux Klan became involved in politics and unleashed a wave of terror against them. They directed most of their violence towards subverting the electoral process. As whites and blacks competed for jobs, whites mostly got the jobs, and violence occurred greatly so they could have the job instead of the blacks. The use of violence continued. As they tried to stop violence from occurring, they created the 15th Amendment, which was ratified. In 1871, during the Ku Klux Klan, violence and imitation proceeded. Federal authorities with military assistance, if necessary, were to arrest and prosecute members of groups that denied a citizen's civil rights. The failure of the Northern Will. Committed to voting rights for black Southerners, widespread among Republicans in 1865 and affirmed in the 15th Amendment, faded. White radical theorists held that it was fully to grant suffrage to African Americans because of an inferior race couldn't hold power over a superior race. Liberal Republicans in the election of 1872. The Republicans called themselves liberal reformers. They put forward an array of suggestions to improve the government and save the Republican Party. When the liberals failed to convince other Republicans to adopt their program, they broke with the party. The Democrats took advantage of this by forging an alliance with the liberals. In the chart over to the side, it says the popular vote was about 0.6%, 43% was Horace Greeley, and 55.6% was S. Grant. The election of 1876. Reconstruction ended with the election of 1876, in which Democrat Samuel J. Tilden ran against the Republican Rutherford B. Haynes. Scandals of the Grand Admission, Northern awareness with Southern Republican Democrats and the preceding economic depression worked in the Democrats' favor. Southern Democrats wanted Tilden to win, but wanted control of their states more. Most importantly, Haynes promised to remove federal support from the remaining Southern Republican governments for the contested electoral votes. The Compromise of 1877 installed Haynes in the White House and gave Democrats control of every state government in the South. Democrats emerged the major winners form of the compromise. The compromise signaled the revocation of civil rights and voting rights for the black Southerners. The 14 to 15 amendments would be dead letters in the South. White South had won and re-entered the Union largely on its own terms, with the freedom to pursue a radical agenda. Over on this side, there is a book called Fraud of the Century, which was about the Compromise of 1877. The memory of Reconstruction. Southern Democrats used the memory of Reconstruction to help maintain themselves in power. For white Democrats had rescued the South from a perfidy of black rule and federal oppression. After the Civil War, a number of white Southerners urged their neighbors to work on rebuilding the Southern rather than hating the Yankees. And over here it talks more about the Yankees, and this is the picture of one of the wars. Failed promise of Reconstruction. Black Southerners dreamed of land ownership, faded as a new labor system regulated them to a lowly position in Southern agriculture. By 1877, they lost most of the voting strength in political offices they held. The golden moment, an unprecedented opportunity for the nation to live up to its ideals by extending equal rights to all its citizens. Reconstruction had no significant permanent effect on the state of blacks in American life. In conclusion, there are 5 major points from this presentation. The Freedmen's Bureau Act was an oversight of resentment labor for former slaves. The Southern Homestead Act provided blacks professional access to the public. Yeah, definitely. No.
Make it part of the question.
Okay. The Civil Rights Act of 1866 defined rights of national citizenship. Military Reconstruction Acts in 1867 set new rules for the readmission of former Confederate states into the Union and secured black voting rights. The last bullet point is Civil Rights Act of 1875, which prohibited racial discrimination in jury selection, public transportation, and public... I'm not speaking that thing.
I'll be in that actually.
You're gonna get 100.
Okay, so this is the end of the presentation of Chapter 16.